Are you looking for affordable office space in Marion? The professional building located at 685 Delaware Avenue is the place for you. For more information, call 740-383-6803. Office space is now available. Again, telephone number 740-383-6803. This is Scott Spears, and today we're going to talk about two serious topics that can affect all our lives: suicide and drug use. To discuss these very important issues, we are joined by the Adam H. Board Director, Jody Hodgins. Jody, how are you?
I'm good, Scott. How are you?
Doing very well. Glad to have you here, and I want to get this out of the way because I think it's very important that people pay attention or come to this. Operation Street Smart will take place on Tuesday, September the 4th from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. at Tri-Rivers Career Center Auditorium. Pre-registration is encouraged but not required. If you'd like to pre-register, you can call 740-387-8531. I think that's a great idea. Jody, what will happen that night?
Well, this is the second time we've had Operation Street Smart here. They were here in February of this year. Only in February they did a day-long program that was about 6 hours long. And essentially this is an abbreviated version. Our goal with this is to increase the number of parents and everyday citizens that come out to this. These are law enforcement professionals with the Franklin County Sheriff's Department, and their whole job is to do undercover drug task force work in Franklin County. And I understand they do get loaned to other areas to help with that. But what they're going to do is talk a little bit about drug trends, talk about some of drug paraphernalia that they see, speak a little bit about the heroin epidemic and what they're seeing with heroin, and certainly talk about what they've learned from our local law enforcement about heroin locally. And they're going to just try to increase awareness among everybody about over-the-counter drugs and other kinds of things like bath salts and all of that kind of stuff. So our whole effort as an opiate task force and from the Adam Board is to just increase people's awareness about drug abuse and encourage parents then to take that next step to have that conversation with their own children.
It sounds like a very important event that everybody should go for. And is there any cost to this event?
No cost. This is free, and the Franklin County Sheriff's Department allows these officers to come to contiguous counties, which we aren't quite contiguous to Franklin County, but they have allowed them to come up here, and there is no cost. This is free and open to the public.
Is there any age limit requirement?
We really don't want people to bring children to this. This is not for children to get educated. Children know a whole lot more than most adults know. Young people are very aware, and they're also much more inclined to use the internet and other forms of social media to find these things out. So we really want this to be for people 18 and older to attend.
You know, Jody, there was a press release that went out, and there were some very interesting statistics on that I want to read for people right now. 57% of prescription opiates are diverted for use by a person other than the one for whom it was prescribed. 57%. In 2010, 2 million people reported using prescription painkillers non-medically for the first time within the last year, nearly 5,500 a day. According to the Centers for Disease Control, one person dies every 19 minutes from prescription drug abuse in the U.S. In Marion County in 2011, there were enough opiate-based prescriptions issued to provide every man, woman, and child in the county with 78 pills. Those are startling statistics.
It's shocking. If we look at that last statistic alone, if you would have gone back to the year 2000, we're talking about 6 pills for every man, woman, and then fast forward to that year, and you're looking at an enormous amount of opiates coming out. And people will say, well, it's a prescription, it's safer. that means that it's okay for me to take. First of all, it's an opiate. It's just like heroin in many respects. It has that opiate derivative in it. The second aspect of that is when physicians prescribe opiate-based medication, they do so by prescribing a very specific amount to an individual. And that doesn't mean that it should be shared. That's one of the reasons we've partnered with the City of Marion and the Marion County Sheriff's Department and Angie Carbetta with litter prevention for the past 3 years to do the drug collection drives. And we do that. The next one is September 29th from 10 to 2 at the Marion County building. Again, a free way for people to get rid of their prescription medication no matter what it is. So it's pretty critical that people be aware of those kinds of numbers, and that you should never share medication with anybody, even if it's your spouse or your child. You absolutely shouldn't do that, because the number one way people are getting it is through diversion.
It's absolutely an amazing problem. We always hear in Marion heroin now. That's the key word. How did this happen, and what's going on?
Well, I think if you talk to 10 people, you're going to get 10 different opinions. But if we look at some of the national data around opiate-based prescriptions, we believe very strongly that the increase in access to opiate-based prescriptions over the last couple of years, over the last 10 years, has caused the increase in heroin use, because if somebody is prescribed opiate-based medication and they do not take it as prescribed, then they're abusing that drug immediately. If they're taking more than the physician has prescribed, they're abusing that drug. So once they begin to do that, there becomes a problem with addiction. If they can no longer get that prescription, or it becomes too costly for them, then they turn to heroin, because heroin is relatively cheap when compared to a prescription. If you have an 80, oxycodone 80, and you want to sell that on the street, you're going to get a lot of money for that, whereas the same price you'd pay for one pill, you could buy a good amount of heroin with that would last you a much longer period of time.
Really? I didn't realize.
Absolutely, it's much cheaper.
So that's that would seem like the obvious reason.
Well, if they're going to heroin, you have to go back to why are they taking this? There are a whole bunch of different reasons people are abusing drugs, but we do know a lot of people are legally prescribed opiate-based medications, and then they get to a point where they are using a larger amount than they were prescribed. They become abusing that drug, and then when they can't get it, they move on to heroin.
And it's become such a problem. It's just tough. What can we do as just regular citizens to help this?
Well, I think there are a number of things we can do. Number one, we can become more aware so that we're having conversations with the young people in our lives and the other people in our lives about how easy it is to get into abusing something like that. So you need to have those conversations with the people you care about. The second thing we can do as neighbors, as people who live in the community, I've lived in Marion County for a long time now, and what I've tried to do over the last few years is be more aware of what's going on in my own neighborhood. And if you see something suspicious, then call the Sheriff's Department or call the City Police Department. They may not be able to immediately make an arrest, because as we know, their numbers are down. It's more challenging for them to get everywhere, but they can begin building a case. We put together, as part of an opiate task force, a pamphlet called What to Watch For. And it's just a very simple checklist of things to be aware of in your community, to be aware of in your neighborhood, in your place of work, so that you are able to notice if there's somebody suspicious in the neighborhood. And report small crime. Even though it may seem insignificant, report that small crime, because again, they can start building a case. That's the second thing. The third thing we can do is to find a way to support treatment. It's really challenging for us. The ANA Board's one of our primary responsibilities is to fund alcohol and other drug treatment. So we serve both Marion and Crawford counties. we get in state general revenue funds to provide alcohol and drug treatment less than $48,000 in a year. I'm going to say that again because people say, no, that can't be right. We get in general revenue funds about $47,800 to serve both Crawford and Marion counties. You cannot provide drug addiction treatment without that, without funds. We are incredibly blessed to have two things in Marion County. One, we have a tax levy that was initially passed in 1981 and has been renewed since then. Without that tax levy, we would not have funds to provide the treatment that we do. The second thing we're really blessed with is to have a really significant network of people in the AA and NA community, Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous. And I say we're blessed to have them because that becomes the support and safety network for people who are trying to get off drugs, whether it's alcohol, heroin, or cocaine, whatever drug they're trying to get off. This is part of that support and safety network. And I'm not sure anybody has any idea, unless you know some of the folks involved in NA and AA, the human good they do for our community every single day. And of course they don't talk about it because they're anonymous, but you know, go on our website, check out the different groups that are meeting. You'll see a real need for this kind of group because we have a listing of AA and NA meetings, and not just in Marion County but in surrounding counties as well.
I think the average question that somebody might have is, if we do, thanks to this tax, which thank goodness we have these prevention skills, what has happened to where it's ballooned the problem?
Well, as the heroin and opiate epidemic has gotten out of control, you know, I'm talking about the pill epidemic, you can see just the number of pills prescribed here. We have so many more people addicted now that it's difficult to stem the tide. We certainly do not have enough resources to provide treatment for all of those people. The other challenge that we have is a lot of times when people get ready to go in for treatment for heroin or opiate addiction, they want to go to an inpatient facility. And the reality is we don't have an inpatient facility, nor do we have the funds. It costs, if we were to send every person to detox at Maryhaven, we're talking $6,000 a person. You know, that $48,000 isn't going to go very far when we're talking about that. So we have more people, we have less resources to treat people. The other thing is we have an HBO series on addiction that you should borrow, Scott, if you have an interest, because it really talks about how opiates begin to reside in a person's brain. And if I'm on prescription opiates and I try to get off, those opiate receptors kick in. And it makes it harder for people because they have a lot of craving with opiate addiction, more so than probably any other kind of addiction. And once that craving kicks into place and those opiate receptors flare up, it's really challenging for people to not want to use. The other thing is, it's horrible to get off opiates. It's not life-threatening as it is when people go off alcohol, but they get very sick to their stomach, they have a lot of diarrhea, they have a lot of ache and pain, and they feel like they have the flu times 50, and they just don't think they can survive it. It's called being dope sick, and they really just can't get through that dope sickness part to get to the other side. We also know, just talking about the brain chemistry piece, that those opiate receptors will continue to flash with a desire for opiates for up to 10 months after somebody goes off. So they have to get through that year before they feel like they're on the other side of things. So this isn't, it's not an easy drug to get behind you.
Again, I want to mention this. Operation Street Smart will take place on Tuesday, September 4th from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. at Tri-Rivers Career Center Auditorium. Pre-registration is encouraged but not required. To register, you can call 740-387-8531. My goodness, it just is very important, I think, for everybody. Jody, before we let you get out of here today, though, I want to talk about something else that has been on my mind a lot because I think it's a growing problem. Correct me if I'm wrong, but suicide.
Mm-hmm. Actually, Marion County has a lower than average in the state suicide rate. But I think the whole issue with suicide is what, again, is the genesis of that. And we know if we look back at people that have had a suicide attempt and that have survived that attempt and we're able to forensically go back and look at what happened, we know that the vast majority of them, over 95% of them, are struggling with depression. And depression is just like any other illness. It's a brain-based illness, and it's not because people have weak will or bad character. Depression is an illness just like if somebody has heart disease or diabetes. In fact, depression is highly treatable and responds very well to both chemically based treatments like medication and talk therapy and support therapy. So a lot of times when people are really struggling with depression, they are in what one of the suicidologists that I've talked to calls they're in a black hole. And all they see is that blackness around them. They don't see any light. They don't see any way to get out of it. And it really chips away at their desire to move forward. What we really are trying to do and have been trying to do with part of our Suicide Prevention Coalition is to encourage every individual to know a little bit about the signs of suicide and to remember 3 words, ACT. And the A stands for acknowledge. Talk to your friend, the person you care about. Acknowledge that you're seeing some signs in them that seem to be different and let them know you're worried about them. The C stands for care. Tell them you care about them, you think that you can get them help, you think they can be helped, and let them know that you're not going to stand by and do nothing. And T is take action, take them to somebody. Don't just simply rely on their word to say they're going to do something. Grill them, push them, use what we call the S word, say suicide out loud to them, because you need to diffuse the power of that word, and you need to let them know there's something on the other side of that. I lost one of my sisters to suicide in 1999, and this is what I learned about her illness over many years. She wanted the same things all of us want. She wanted employment, she wanted friends, she wanted to be part of a community. And she struggled with an illness called manic depression, bipolar disorder. And as she continued to struggle with that, she had some periods of time she would do very well. She had periods of time she would medicate herself with alcohol because of that depression, that bipolar disorder. And unfortunately, she lost her battle, and she did complete suicide. And I don't want that to happen to any other family. It's a horrible thing for families to go through because you feel always that guilt and that wondering of what you didn't do that you could do. I'm not any different than anybody else. I have that guilt. I wonder what I could have done that would have been different for her. So what I encourage people to do is to really learn a little bit about the signs of depression. You can always go to the Adam Board website. We have a lot of different things on there. It's www.mcadamh.com. And we've got a whole little signs and symptoms of depression and suicide on there. We have to just educate ourselves in general. I think this is part of your mission, Scott, to provide some education to the community, and I'm all for that. And we can go to the library. We have a great library here. There's always the internet. There's great ways to learn something, but we have to use that knowledge and that power and have it touch another human being.
Being that it's so personal with a sister committing suicide, do you ever, I don't think you ever get over a death, but does it ever get any better when a suicide happens? That's so tragic.
No, there's a wonderful saying about suicide loss, and it's called a complicated loss. When certain people will pass away, may have, when my parents each died, when my father died first, people are sad for you, but you expect that a parent is going to go, before you. When somebody dies from suicide, people don't exactly know what to say to you. And in that complicated loss, it complicates your interaction with other people. Some families are just very uncomfortable about saying that that's how their loved one died. And in that complicated loss, we sometimes lose sight of the fact that these illnesses very often run in families, because depression, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, those are all illnesses that will track through families. So I had to go back and look at family history of depression in my family. I had to be very aware and talk to both of my children about that. I think my son was a senior in high school when my sister died. So we'd already had those discussions about depression before, and certainly I had those with my daughter, but we have to just be less embarrassed and more willing to open up and talk about these things. Even if somebody has had a suicide attempt in the past, we know that's a risk factor for attempting a suicide again. We have to talk to kids about those kinds of things. Don't let it be the dirty family secret, because it isn't. These are mental illnesses just like any other health illness we have.
It's a disease, not a disgrace.
Absolutely. That's a great way to put it.
Absolutely. I think that's very important. Jody D. Hodgins, Adam H. Board Director. Thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you.
It's been very important. Catch you next time.